Guys, I am so excited to share this thought for today. Wow, we really have some better news to unpack, so get ready. We are in the book of Ephesians today, and when I saw that that was going to be the book for today, I got really excited because I absolutely love this letter. Out of all of the writings of Paul, this is probably my favorite, or maybe the book of Romans. It's a bit of a toss-up. But what I love about this book is that it outlines better than any other book of the Bible what a new identity in Christ is all about. There's this idea that runs through this letter and all of the New Testament as well, that when a person has committed to Jesus, they now adopt a new identity in Christ. And this is an essential piece of the gospel. I've talked about this very topic in depth before. If you're interested in learning more about that, you can just look for the video titled Identity on our church's YouTube page here. Actually, I'll link it below in the YouTube description as well. Check that out if you're curious about that subject. Now, since I've already talked about this topic before, and to talk about it here would take way too long, today I want to look at instead another amazing concept in Ephesians. But before we get there, a quick overview of the book first. So Paul divides this letter into two halves, which in your English Bible are nicely divided into chapter groups. So chapters 1 to 3 are about who you are in Christ, which is a phrase that keeps popping up all throughout the book. And then chapters 4 to 6 are about what it means to live in this new reality. So the book in a sentence would be, here are all of these amazing things that are now true of you because of Jesus, and therefore, here's what it looks like to live with this new identity. And with this overall framework in mind, I invite you to go back and read or reread the book of Ephesians and contemplate how different passages fit into this overarching train of thought. I think we often pull verses out of this book from their larger context, and they're often powerful on their own, but these verses are much more powerful and they make more sense when placed into the flow of Paul's thought. So the armor of God is a great example of this. It's in Ephesians chapter 6, this vivid word picture about spiritual warfare. But what does it mean in the context of everything that came before it? I'll let you think about that one on your own time. We're going to stay in the first couple chapters of the book. So at the end of chapter 1, Paul says a prayer for the church that he's writing to, starting in verse 18. I pray that the eyes of your heart may be enlightened. Paul is going to pray that the hearts of his readers would wake up to three truths. Here they come. In order that you may know the hope to which he has called you, the riches of his glorious inheritance in his holy people, and his incomparably great power for us who believe. So I put the three things in green for you. Paul prays that believers would know in their hearts about the hope God has called them to, about God's riches for his people, and about God's power for all who believe. Now, we could spend a whole sermon on each of these, but I just want you to look at the last one. I pray that the eyes of your heart would be enlightened so that you would know God's incomparably great power for us who believe. Now, there are whole theologies built around the idea that the power of God, like what Paul is talking about here, is for the purpose of fulfilling my own goals and giving me success in my endeavors. This is called the prosperity gospel, and it has a lot of flaws. Paul, however, clarifies what the nature of this power is. That power is the same as the mighty strength he exerted when he raised Christ from the dead and seated him at his right hand in the heavenly realms. So this isn't some sort of secular name it, claim it power. This is resurrection power. Now, what does that mean for us? Why would we need resurrection power? Well, if you keep reading in the next chapter, Paul makes this picture even more vivid. As for you, you were dead in your transgressions and sins, in which you used to live when you followed the ways of this world. All of us also lived among them at one time, gratifying the cravings of our flesh and following its desires and thoughts. Like the rest, we were by nature deserving of wrath. Even though we're alive, Paul says that for at least some period of time, we were dead. And this isn't some normal physical death. He says we were dead in sin. Paul's painting a spiritual picture here. We were stuck, gratifying the flesh, giving into our worst inclinations, slaves to bad influences and forces that lead to our demise. But then something happened. But because of his great love for us, God, who is rich in mercy, made us alive with Christ, even when we were dead in transgressions. It is by grace you have been saved, and God raised us up with Christ and seated us with him in the heavenly realms in Christ Jesus. Wow. Okay, what? That was a bunch of spiritual language, and I'm not sure that I followed all of that. How am I raised up with Christ? What does that mean? I'm a visual learner, so maybe this will help. I've shown this picture before during a couple sermons. The Jews of Jesus' day saw the timeline of the world as a very linear thing. There were two phases, which you can see there. The present age, which was life on earth with sinfulness. And then there was the age to come, which is where God would make everything right again. And somewhere, right at the end of the present age, would be what they called the day of the Lord, which was a moment of God's judgment where he would put an end to evil and usher in the age to come. Well, Jesus shows up, and he disrupts this very ordered worldview. Why? Well, because of his resurrection. See, when Jesus rose from the grave, he introduced some of the age to come right in the middle of the present age. Resurrection was a thing of the future, but Jesus makes it explode into the present. And the New Testament writers, Paul especially, pick up on this theme. They say it's not just that Jesus' resurrection was a one-time blip in the past. This same interruption of the age to come in the present age can keep happening. You see, the hope of the gospel is not just Jesus rose from the dead, and that means the future looks bright for the believer. The hope of the gospel is that Jesus rose from the dead, and that has power in the present. Paul says the same power that resurrected Jesus from the grave is available to us right now. That's what I'm trying to visualize for you here. Jesus' resurrection opens access to new life in the Spirit right now. We too can experience some of tomorrow today through the power of God's Spirit. This is what Ephesians is all about. Christ rose from the dead, and now this same divine power can resurrect the parts of your life that are most dead in sin and give you new life. Through an encounter with Jesus, even the most selfish, toxic, burdened, dead in sin people can be transformed into people who are truly life-giving. I mean, if that isn't better news, I don't know what is. You can live with hope that the present state of your life doesn't define the destiny of your life. Your addiction or your messed up relationships or your baggage or your damaged self-worth, these places of death in your life can experience resurrection power. And so I ask you, where do you need resurrection power? Where in your life do you feel most trapped? Where do you have the most difficult time surrendering to God? What area of your life is most draining to you? Is it a damaged relationship that you want to restore? Is it bad choices in your past that you can't seem to escape? Is it a habit that you need to quit or an idol that you need to break? What would it look like to surrender some part of your life in faith to God, believing that His grace holds real, present-day power? I can't tell you that it'll be easy, because it won't be. I can't tell you that it will be instant, because it will likely be a process. I can't tell you that it won't require sacrifice, because it will. Every resurrection requires a death first. But it's a death that brings new life. And Jesus wants to and has the power to work this experience in your life. You've just got to invite Him in. There's this great worship song called Resurrection Power. It's by Chris Tomlin. Maybe you've heard it before. And it talks about everything that we just talked about. If you want a worship song to take with you through today, that's a great one. In fact, I'll put a link to the song in the video description below. But friends, don't just play Resurrection Power on your phone or on your computer. Live with resurrection power in your life. It's available to you. Where do you need it? Tomorrow, we will be in a different book of the Bible. I've clicked the randomizer button, and I'm guessing it's going to be an Old Testament prophet. Ha! I was right. Haggai. All right, that's where we're going to be tomorrow. Thank you for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe to our channel so that you keep getting these in your updated feed every morning. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Goodbye.